It's Ken Harbaugh on the MeidasTouch Network. I have been waiting for a good excuse to share this incredible political ad with you. It's from North America's building trades unions, and it is a perfect intro to my interview this week with Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb. Mayor Bibb is leading Cleveland's renaissance, which has only been made possible because of the policies and the hard work of the Biden administration. Those policies stand in sharp contrast to the years of broken promises of the Trump administration. Now, cities and towns across America's heartland are making a comeback. Continuing that progress depends on re-electing Joe Biden and defeating Donald Trump. Mayor Bibb knows the stakes, and he and I talk about the danger that a second Trump term would pose, not only to the economic prospects of cities like Cleveland, but to our basic freedoms. But first, here's Shawn McGarvey, president of North America's Building and Trade Unions.
You would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Donald Trump, he's not a good man. He's not a good person. He does not care about anybody in this world except Donald Trump. That's it. That's all.
A very clear and present danger.
Now he's looking to get in that position again to exert revenge on people. I go all the way back to the 80s with Donald Trump and him trying to, get his mug on page 6 of the New York Post. The only difference between the Donald Trump of the 80s and the Donald Trump of today is he feels totally free to let his dark side out. And his dark side is very, very dark and very, very dangerous for this country. We can't let our democracy that we've worked for and we've cherished just disintegrate with the wrong leader at the wrong time. I can tell you that he personally committed to me that he was going to get our pensions fixed. He understood who was affected by these pensions. He assured me, I'm the President of the United States, I'll just call Mitch, I'll tell him to put it in the bill. Is everybody gonna love me? Everybody loves me, right? Is everybody gonna love me? Yes, Mr. President, you fix the pension, everybody's gonna love you. Well, that was wasted breath. There was lots of other things put in that bill. There was tax cuts put in that bill for rich people. Donald Trump promised infrastructure every year.
Infrastructure is the easiest of all.
Donald Trump was not interested in any of the policy that actually goes along with being president of the United States. Trump was interested in the pomp and circumstance, the plane, the helicopter. It's all about him. Donald Trump is incapable of running anything, let alone the most powerful country in the history of the world. And God help us if he gets anywhere near that White House in the future.
The president signed the bipartisan infrastructure bill, CHIPS and Science Act, the landmark Inflation Reduction Act.
Hard-fought victory for the president.
These massive pieces of legislation have been passed. It's incredible, but it isn't like Schoolhouse Rock, okay? There's lots of work to be done after the president actually signs a bill. They can write the rules so the rules work for working people. They can write the rules so the rules don't work for working people. The language that President Biden put in the legislation, he's got everybody covered. He forgot about nobody. It's been amazing.
15 million new jobs in just 3 years. 800,000 new manufacturing jobs in America and counting.
So many times we were promised, and then nobody really delivered. Once again, somebody comes in and promises, only lo and behold, delivering. I think we'll step back from where we're at in a few years, and we'll realize how big the impact of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris has been. With the monumental pieces of legislation that they passed, that are just now starting to take root from coast to coast in this country. The future is so bright, it's unbelievable. We're bringing domestic manufacturing back. We're going to get broadband for the first time in huge swaths of this country. President Biden fixed our pension funds to make them even more solid for the future. Like they say, rising tide lifts all boats. By the time Biden's done his second term, anybody that wants a middle class living in this country is going to have the opportunity to have one, whether it's in construction or someplace else. This is all made possible through the work that he's done, working with leaders in Congress to set the table for the renaissance of the American economy.
Towns that have been forgotten and left behind for dead are coming alive again because of you all and what we're doing. Finish the job. We are the United States of America.
North America's building trades unions couldn't be more proud or dedicated to the endorsement of Joseph Biden and Kamala Harris for President and Vice President of the United States of America. We will use everything at our disposal in our quest to have Joe Biden reelected as the President of the United States. You can count on NAP2 getting it done.
My guest today is Justin Bibb, the mayor of the city of Cleveland. He's 2 years into his first term and has been a leading example of a new generation of mayors that is reimagining what government can and should do for the people it serves. We go back a couple years, so if this gets a little informal, that's why. Justin, it is great to have you on the show.
Good to be with you, Ken.
You have said that America's mayors are on the front lines of every major issue we face today, but that mayors are also the ones closest to the solutions. I love the optimism in that, but we are now in an election year in which the issues you're talking about are going to be used to divide Americans like never before. How worried are you about the ability of Americans in cities like Cleveland and beyond to get through this?
Well, Ken, you raise an important point. This will be a very important election, not just for my generation, but for the next generation. And as I think about the current debate right now, what concerns me is we, as a nation, we aren't having an honest conversation about the kind of leadership we need to address these issues. And Ken, as a mayor of a big city like Cleveland, I see these issues every single day on the front lines, from talking to the family members that are victims of gun violence, to talking to environmental activists about how we address our climate and environmental justice needs and issues, to talking to young people who are scared about the future of our democracy. All those things are going to play a role in this upcoming election. And we must find a way to have honest, common sense, pragmatic conversations about how we move this country forward.
You've begun that conversation in Cleveland on a number of fronts, but as mayor, you've spoken out about the impact that the Biden administration has had on cities like Cleveland.
Yeah.
I don't think Biden and his administration are getting nearly enough credit. Can you talk about what ARPA and even the CHIPS Act and the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, what is actually making it to cities like Cleveland, and how we can do a better job at giving credit where credit's due?
Well, no president probably since FDR has invested in American cities like President Joe Biden. I think about the decisions I would have had to make if we didn't have the American Rescue Plan. We would have had to lay off hundreds of firefighters, hundreds of police officers, hundreds of teachers in Cleveland without the American Rescue Plan. And because of the American Rescue Plan, we've been able to lay a strong foundation to seed a comeback in Cleveland. From the $50 million we have deployed to take 1,000 acres of vacant land, predominantly in the east side of Cleveland, and turn that vacant land into shovel-ready job sites for the future, that's progress. From the work we did, putting $17 million in the fund to help us eradicate lead paint in our homes, that is progress. From the work we did to seed a $10 million neighborhood safety fund to invest in the proven interventions and solutions that we know that can reduce crime on our streets, that is progress. And that progress in Cleveland would not have been possible without the leadership of President Biden. You also talked about the CHIPS bill. As you know, President Trump, when he was in office, talked a whole lot about bringing American manufacturing back. He talked a whole lot about Infrastructure Week, Infrastructure Month. Well, because of President Biden's leadership, we're going to have an infrastructure decade in America, We're also going to see a whole new industrial revolution happening because of the CHIPS Act, and Ohio and Cleveland are going to benefit tremendously from that. So this President Biden, has delivered on every single point to bring back cities like Cleveland, Ohio.
I am sure you have seen the videos. They've gone viral of Republicans cutting opening ceremony tape, going to groundbreakings and saying, look what I've done for my district. In almost every case, they voted against the dollars that made those projects possible. How do we communicate that more effectively in an election year to the voters who need to continue this progress?
I have a very simple way of doing this when I'm talking to my residents. And I would encourage every voter as they go to the ballot box this upcoming November, ask your member of Congress and whoever you want to vote for president, ask him, where are the receipts? Where are the receipts? How did you vote on the CHIPS bill? How did you vote on the Inflation Reduction Act to help us address climate and environmental justice? How did you vote on the bipartisan infrastructure bill? How did you vote on the American Rescue Plan? It's great to show up at the ribbon cuttings, but did you vote? And were you a part of the work to make this moment possible? So when voters ask for the receipts, that should tell them how to vote this upcoming November.
We're talking about economic issues. I think we would probably all agree that it's the social issues that are really tearing us apart. You have said that reproductive rights is a city issue. Can you explain that and then talk about what's at stake when it comes to issues like that?
You know, Ken, I never would have thought that as a mayor, I would have to come out and talk about what I'm doing at the local level to protect a woman's right to choose.
Yeah.
And as we saw the reversal of Roe v. Wade, America's mayors stepped up and we were vocal champions of reproductive choice in this country. We introduced a critical set of public policy here in Cleveland after the reversal of Roe v. Wade, talking about the fact that we weren't going to prosecute women if they sought to get an abortion. We were going to use the bully pulpit of our public health office to make sure we protect the data when it comes to women's reproductive choices. And we were going to join a lawsuit with other mayors across the state of Ohio to make sure we did everything we can to protect choice in this state. And when our extreme MAGA Republican Party in Ohio tried to eliminate one voice, one vote and increase the threshold to 60%, I knocked on doors. I went to rallies. We mobilized the vote to make sure we have one voice, one vote in Ohio, and we codified a woman's right to choose in Ohio last year. And so we made great progress. But this election, by re-electing President Biden, by sending Senator Sherrod Brown back to the United States Senate, we have a unique opportunity to codify Roe v. Wade in law once and for all.
You've talked about working with mayors across Ohio, across the country. I've got to believe there are some Republicans in that group who privately talk to you and say, it's gotten crazy. What are those conversations like? You don't have to name names, but I have to imagine that conversation is happening all the time with Republicans who just want to get stuff done, but see their party imploding.
It happens a lot. I was just in Columbus last week for our annual luncheon with Ohio Mayor's Alliance with local lawmakers in the legislature. And so many of them came up to me talking about how they are just so sick and tired of the petty politics undermining the ability of our legislature to see real material progress in Columbus. And, you know, Ken, as you know, as a mayor, I don't have the luxury of passing the buck to the next legislative session. My residents want to see real change now. But I would tell you this, despite the craziness we're seeing in our legislature right now, there are some common sense, pragmatic Republican lawmakers who want to see real progress and change in Ohio. I'll give you one example. Through a spin class I used to go to here in Cleveland, I met State Senator Nathan Manning His wife was my spin class instructor. And in 2022, my administration was leading an effort to expunge low-level marijuana convictions for our residents. And unfortunately, the courts tried to stop us. In fact, they did stop us. And a state senator, Nathan Manning, reached out. He said, Mayor Bibb, I love what you guys are trying to do up in Cleveland. How can I help? How can I help make this effort around criminal justice reform statewide? So our teams got together. We came up with a piece of legislation. He included it in his bill, Senate Bill 288. And then Governor DeWine signed the legislation. And now every city and every county across the state can expunge low-level marijuana convictions. So it can be done, but we need more common sense, bipartisan lawmakers like State Senator Nathan Manning all across this great state here in Ohio.
Where that good intention and common sense approach to government seems to break down on the right is when it comes to Trump. And it happens almost every time. I've met Nate. We won't pick on him. Great guy, but there aren't folks like that speaking out in an election year against a president who tried to undermine democracy, who has cozied up to Putin and is betraying a country that is fighting for freedom, not just for itself, but for the entire Western alliance. Why is Trump such a singular figure in his ability to intimidate those, air quotes, good Republicans?
Ken, I think you know this better than anybody, but the Republican Party now is a party of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's become a party of a cult where pragmatic, common sense, basic ideas of what the Republican Party once stood for no longer are relevant. You know, I'm not that old. I turned 37 this upcoming Friday, but I still remember the Republican Party of Jack Kemp, the Republican Party of Mitt Romney, the Republican Party of Paul Ryan and others who, you know, would work with Democrats to get things done. And it's unfortunate that that Republican Party is not as vibrant, is not as boisterous as it once was. And I think having a strong, diverse Republican Party only helps the Democratic Party and only helps our country and therefore our democracy. And so while I'm optimistic that after this election we can finally get beyond the party of Trump, it's going to take a new generation of Republicans to step up and take the mantle and truly do a better job of speaking truth to power, to remake the Republican Party into the party, once again, of small government. And I don't see that happening anytime soon over the next upcoming election cycle.
You said that a vibrant, boisterous Republican Party actually helps the Democratic Party. That's not something I hear often, and it's something I believe to my core. A healthy democracy requires that kind of good faith political competition. I take it that's what you mean by that. It actually makes us better and more responsive as a party.
Absolutely. It's what our founding fathers sought out when they created this country. And I believe that having a two-party system that's vibrant, that's diverse, only helps the country long term. But I also think that we are seeing a movement now, particularly among a newer generation of voters, where they're more likely to be independent. As I travel across this state, I recognize that in many ways, folks still think Ohio is a purple state, and I still do as well.
Yeah.
You know, this is a state that, you know, President Obama won twice, a state that Senator Sherrod Brown has been very successful in as our senior senator. And I think what's missing is a group of candidates, particularly in the Democratic Party, that can speak to all sides of Ohioans, whether you live in Zanesville or Columbus or Cleveland or Massillon. We need Democrats who understand what a common sense Ohio agenda looks like around jobs and economic opportunity, around addressing gun violence, around making sure we can have a green energy economy in Ohio that benefits our entire state. All those things, a majority of all Ohioans agree on. We just need more candidates who can speak that truth to power.
Well, let's talk about one of those candidates, Sherrod Brown. The 24 election obviously is going to be dominated by the Trump-Biden contest, but it is going to matter all the way down the ticket. Control of the Senate is going to be decided very likely in Ohio and places like Ohio. How is Sherrod doing, and how are you helping? How can Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati make the difference there?
Senator Brown is off to an amazing start. Not only is he my United States Senator, he is my resident. He lives in Cleveland, Ohio, in Ward 2 in the southeast side, but he has hit the ground running. He's had an impressive start in terms of fundraising, and I'm looking forward to working with the big city mayors across the state to knock on doors, host community gatherings and parties to get out the vote. We need Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati to show up and show out and do more than its fair share to protect Senator Sherrod Brown in his bid to win a re-election. And I can't even fathom having 2 U.S. senators in J.D. Vance and Bernie Moreno representing Ohio. I don't want to even entertain that scenario. So I'm doing whatever I can to re-elect Senator Sherrod Brown to another term to the United States Senate.
Can you talk about the stakes? We see what happens when someone like J.D. Vance beats a true public servant like Tim Ryan and is now carrying the torch for Russia in the United States Senate. I couldn't believe what he's been saying over the past few weeks. Talk to us about Bernie Moreno and what he represents and just the fundamental shift in Ohio politics that would signal if he beats a public servant like Sherrod Brown.
We're going to have potentially 2 extreme MAGA Republicans dictating Ohio's agenda in Washington, D.C. And frankly, to me, that does not represent the values of this state. And I was quite pleased when we had Senator Rob Portman and Senator Sherrod Brown representing us in the United States Senate, because in my opinion, they both were common sense lawmakers who understood Ohio's values and Ohio's ideals. And so I'm concerned that we're going to go to the extreme right once again on abortion, the extreme right once again on taxes, the extreme right on not addressing climate change, and the extreme right on not preserving and protecting American democracy. And in terms of foreign policy, look, we understand that we need someone in the U.S. Senate that's going to be a voice of reason, given all that's at stake at home and abroad. And that's why we have to send Senator Sherrod Brown back to the U.S. Senate for another 6 years.
It's Ken Harbaugh on the MeidasTouch Network. The film Against All Enemies, which I co-produced with Ben Meiselas and this network, is the #1 documentary on Apple TV, and it's now available on Amazon. If you haven't seen it yet, check it out, and please leave a review. It really does make a huge difference in helping spread the word. Thanks, Meidas Mighty. Let's use our power well. Most clothes are uncomfortable or too tight or never actually the size you really are, not to mention the annoyance of trying to put a good outfit together. Everyone wants to dress their best and look good at all times because, frankly, it's a confidence booster. So here's the deal. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Their commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man. They help you get ready for any occasion with the Rhone Commuter Collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone Commuter Collection. Their 4-way stretch fabric provides breathability and flexibility that leaves you free to enjoy what life throws your way, from your commute to work to your 18 holes of golf. It's time to feel confident without the hassle. With Rhone's wrinkle release technology, wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. With Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can ditch the dry cleaner altogether. I absolutely love Rhone. It's comfortable yet professional and has truly become my favorite clothing brand. We're on the move a lot, whether it's jumping from meeting to meeting or catching a flight or an important dinner. The Rhone commuter collection has never let me down. The versatility and overall comfort of the collection is undefeated. Even after I wear it all day, I still feel super fresh because of that Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. The commuter collection can get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. Head to Rhone.com/boats and use promo code BOATS to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/boats and use code BOATS. It's time to find your corner office comfort. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. Then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You can also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep you on top of your health game. The key to metabolic health is something called metabolic flexibility, and that's where Lumen really shines. It refers to your body's ability to efficiently switch between using different fuel sources like carbs and fats. There are preferred times to use each, and how well you can switch places you on the metabolic flexibility spectrum. Because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, better sleep, etc. After getting to know you through your breath, Lumen gives you a metabolic flex score that you can track and improve upon. So, if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me and use BOATS to get $100 off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.ME and use BOATS at checkout for $100 off. Thanks, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. You've brought up climate a couple times now, and if I recall correctly, you've said that you see yourself as a climate mayor, but you never imagined that when
That's
you
correct.
were campaigning.
Yeah.
It's probably, until very recently, not something that is at the top of the list of a mayor's priorities, but it's become one of your top issues. How did that evolution occur?
Well, I'm so grateful to be the current chair of Climate Mayors, a group of over 300 mayors from both sides of the aisle, all focused on addressing climate change across the country. And Ken, when I was running for mayor, polling very, very, very low in 2021.
2%.
2%. Knocking on doors, talking to voters. I remember an interaction I had with a single mom on the east side, a Black family. And she was telling me about the low air quality in her neighborhood and how that affected her son's asthma. And in doing the research, I quickly discovered that this part of the city had some of the lowest rates of air quality and one of the lowest tree canopies in the city. But yet, a couple blocks to the west, on the west side of Cleveland, you had some of the highest rates of air quality and a lot more of a more robust tree canopy. To me, it was a climate and environmental justice issue from that standpoint. And so every decision I make as mayor is through a lens around both climate and environmental justice, to the green jobs that are available right now and to this new burgeoning green economy, to the work we're doing to weatherize homes, to lower the energy burden as one of the most energy burdened cities in the country, to making sure we can finally see real development and change on our waterfronts to really be a resilient city long term. All those things are interconnected. And as a mayor, I have a major opportunity to really set the tone at the local level to address these issues.
I'm making a broad overgeneralization here, but there seems to be a real difference in how younger mayors approach leadership. And maybe it's as simple as an innovative mindset, but I'm thinking of Pete Buttigieg, who we've had on this show, or the mayor of Baltimore, who made headlines after the Key Bridge collapse, and his leadership of his community through that. There just seems to be a different approach altogether. Am I giving you all too much credit?
No, I mean, listen, it's a new wave of leadership, I believe, and I really think that wave of leadership started after and during the pandemic.
Mm.
During the pandemic, it was America's mayors who were probably the most trusted voices
Right.
about what was going on during that national crisis. They were the ones getting PPE out to residents and neighbors. They were the ones coming up with strategies around the vaccine. They were the ones leading efforts for folks to get tested during the pandemic. And so I think the pandemic, not only the pandemic of COVID-19, but the murder of George Floyd, really elevated America's mayors as the voice of reason and a voice of real change. And as we see all the dysfunction in DC right now, I think we are quickly becoming a nation of city states where all the innovation, whether it be around jobs, the economy, climate change, addressing gun violence, all those innovations are now being led by some of the best leaders in the country, and those leaders are mayors.
There's a downside to that. And you have remarked on the rural-urban divide. I'm going to pull a quote here. You said, in Ohio, it's not a Democrat or Republican issue. It's an urban-rural divide. America's cities are charging ahead. Some of them are doing great. Most of them are doing better than the rural communities that surround them. That is leading to friction that we don't know how to manage, and it's politicized.
You're right. And I remember one of my first interactions as mayor in Columbus during an Ohio Mayor's Alliance event. And a Republican lawmaker, which I will not name, asked me.
I'll ask you afterwards.
Yeah, he asked me about my tenure so far as mayor. And he said, well, Mayor Bibb, let me give you a little piece of advice. If you ran your city like we run our townships, you'd be a lot better off. Think about that for a second. Running a city as diverse and unique and as complex as Cleveland is very different than running a rural township. And both cities have equal importance to the state, don't get me wrong. But my challenges are unique and different. And unfortunately, as they've continued to erode and attack home rule, many members of the legislature in Columbus don't recognize that stark void and difference. That's why, I do whatever I can to expose rural Republican lawmakers to what's happening in Cleveland and really expose them to the breadth and scope of what we're faced with. Everything from how we maintain great assets like our 3 world-class sports teams to the needs we need around housing, to the needs we have around jobs and higher ed education. All those things play a role in how we make tough decisions. And I think through more exposure, more listening, more open, honest dialogue, we can bridge this rural-urban divide.
I think that exposure is the key to almost every problem we face as a society. I go back to this quote often, but the idea that it's hard to hate up close. You have talked a lot about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in city government and in the city. I think that is such a powerful force to address the division that besets us now, but it has also become the latest bogeyman on the right. It seems like every couple of years they come up with something. It was CRT not too long ago. They seem to have forgotten about that. It's kitchen appliances now, right? They're talking about the government, Biden's government coming for your kitchen appliances. And lately it's been DEI. Why do you think they are so terrified of the idea of diversity?
Well, I love how my brother and friend, Mayor Brandon Scott, reversed that DEI and acronym. Now he calls it duly elected incumbent, which I love. And I'm supporting him for his reelection to lead the great city of Baltimore, Maryland. But I think what the Republicans do a really good job of, unfortunately, is they know how to weaponize these cultural issues in a way that distracts people from the real issues we should be focused on. So instead of talking about how we can do a better job of having red flag laws and common sense background checks and getting rid of the ability of folks to have assault weapons, they talk about CRT and DEI and transgender folks in sports. It's a distraction. And in many times, we as Democrats, we fall for the bait. And I think it's important for us as Democrats to stay focused on the issues. But as we stay focused on the issues, we need to tell the stories of the voters that we're impacting every single day. And as a mayor, I don't have the luxury of getting distracted with, these DC Republican talking points because Mrs. Smith at Olivet Institutional Baptist Church doesn't give a damn about it. She wants her trash picked up, that pothole fixed, and a safe park for her grandkids to play at. That's what I wake up thinking about every single day. And in my opinion, I wish every member of Congress could spend a month serving as a mayor. And I bet if every single member of Congress did that, we get a lot more done in DC.
I bet we would. Can you also talk about the power of diversity to strengthen communities? I almost wore my "The Land Was Built by Immigrants" t-shirt, but I knew you'd be wearing a tie, so I didn't. But Cleveland is an incredibly diverse city and better for it.
I had an up-close opportunity to experience this when I went on the inaugural flight from Cleveland to Dublin that we just did with Aer Lingus last year. And I didn't know a lot about the Cleveland Irish connection until I landed in Achill Island last spring. And in my research, I quickly found that over 250,000 people in Cleveland call Achill Island in Ireland home. And many folks in Ireland escaped famine and escaped religious persecution in Ireland to come to America and come to Cleveland for their version of the American dream. And like many Black Americans who came up to Cleveland from the segregated South, many Irish Americans came to Cleveland to be a part of our industrial revolution as well too. And it's that story to me that makes the American experiment so powerful. That's why I'm so optimistic about Cleveland's future and our country's future, because that's in our DNA. And we just need to find a way to get back to that in terms of how we think about coming together as a community. Now, don't get me wrong. We have a lot of challenges and issues we need to tackle in terms of our country's immigration challenges. Of course, we need bipartisan immigration reform. Of course, we need to have a safe and secure border. Of course, we need a pathway for citizenship for folks who want to come to our country and play by the rules and work hard and be a part of the great American experiment. But until we have folks in DC who can come together and have that conversation, we're going to continue to see this be a wedge issue against Democrats and Republicans. And we need the talent here in Cleveland. We need to grow our population. I hear from companies all the time about the need for diverse immigrant talent. And so this is a major problem, and we need to find a way to get some real progress once and for all.
Is your overall optimism shared by other city mayors? Are they bullish on the future of cities and the future of America because of that?
Oh, maybe it depends on what day of the week, but no, all kidding aside, I think this crop of mayors leading cities right now is very optimistic about the future, because we have no choice but to be optimistic, because so many of our residents are depending on our leadership. And for me, my big source of optimism really comes from my family. My dad was one of the first Black cops and firefighters in a suburb of Cleveland, in Cleveland Heights. My mom, while it took her over 20 years to get her associate's her bachelor's and her master's, finally became a social worker. My grandma was a small business owner who then became a community activist to fight crime and keep our block safe at the height of the crack epidemic in the 1990s. I have no choice but to be optimistic because I've seen optimism and resilience in my life. And I pray that in this election, we work our butts off to reelect Senator Sherrod Brown, reelect President Biden, and hopefully turn the page on the politics of chaos and division, and finally have a politics of compromise, a politics of progress, and a politics of optimism once again.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I have it in my research notes. Was your dad also a U.S. Navy diver?
He was a diver in the Navy in Vietnam.
That's pretty badass. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That optimistic sensibility, I think, might also be inherent to progressivism. I've had this conversation with Senator Brown. The whole premise is the idea that progress is possible. It's natural if the conditions are set right, as opposed to conservatism, which seeks to either preserve a status quo or return to a great again world, right? Go back to the 1950s, which is the whole MAGA appeal, an imagined America where a certain group was on top. I don't know if you've given your optimism, much of a philosophical, or seen it through a philosophical lens, but I think it might be part of our shared progressivism.
It really is. And, I don't necessarily consider myself a progressive in the contemporary sense. I believe in progress, don't get me wrong. And I believe in the simple motto of well done is better than well said. And as someone who is still new and early in their political career, the best thing I can do is do everything humanly possible within my power to deliver on everything I campaigned on when I ran for mayor. And don't get me wrong, it's very hard in a job like this where there's so many battles, so many fights, so many interest groups to manage and coalesce together. But at the end of the day, if every politician, whether you're running for mayor or city council or school board or president, if you just delivered on as much as you could of what you campaigned or promised voters, to me, that's the social contract. That's why you're in office, to be a conduit for them, to be their voice. And to me, that's what progressivism should be about, right? Progressing on the issues you champion and campaigned on, and being a part of what I call the get stuff done party, right? Just get stuff done, because folks are just too tired, too stressed out. Everyday folks got too much on their plate to be worried about all the chaos that we see in local government and state government and at the federal government in DC. They just want us to do our jobs because they have to work every single day and do their jobs and put food on the table and pay their bills.
I don't think most of this audience is going to appreciate the challenges you face. When you took office, Cleveland was ranked the poorest big city in America. I mean, we've spent 33 minutes now talking about the future and progress and what we're doing, what you're doing for your residents, but it is a mountain to climb.
It is. And, we took office with a myriad of challenges, the first new mayor in nearly 2 decades. And, I always thought it would happen faster in terms of changing the culture, but you can't change a bureaucracy overnight. And one of the lessons I learned in my first 6 months in office, because I was in a hurry to get stuff done, sometimes you got to go slow in order to go fast. So what does that mean? Well, sometimes you got to bring people together, right? In a very intentional, thoughtful way to build trust, to build buy-in, to get the long-term, sustainable, systemic result that you seek and want to see happen. And I think we've done a really good job of setting the tone since we took office, from the work we've done to modernize City Hall, from our new website to our new 311 call center we'll be launching later this summer, to our new open data portal to be a more transparent, open government, to the work we're doing to cut down on violent crime. One of my big goals is to make Cleveland one of the safest big cities in the country. Already year to date, homicides are down over 40%, carjackings down over 30%. We're making progress on that. We're also making progress on finally seeing real development on our waterfronts from the Cuyahoga River to Lake Erie. And every mayor, probably since Tom Johnson, has had a lakefront plan. But we think this is the time where the plan will actually come into fruition, from the great alignment we see in DC and Columbus as well to here at the county and with our city council. This is the moment to see cranes in the sky on our waterfronts. And so we made a lot of good progress. There's so much more to be done, Ken, but I'm pleased with where we are and excited for what's ahead.
This is super local, but I love that you refer to waterfronts. I was just at Wendy Park yesterday. We are such a special city in that we have, a world-class river that was on fire just a generation ago.
50 years ago,
Just 50 years. All right. I'm getting my math's a little off, but it is a case study in what government can do when it is held accountable. And the Cuyahoga River, you can fish out of it now. And Lake Erie as well. What happens to all this? What happens to the whole approach to progress if Trump wins? If we lose the kind of mentality that got us the CHIPS Act and the rescue plan and the infrastructure bill, what's at stake?
There's a whole lot at stake. I'm worried that we're going to see a slowdown of investment in cities. I'm worried we're going to see another major attack on mayors like we saw when Trump was at the helm. Because so much of the progress we've made since I took office has been because of the strong partnership I have with the White House and with leaders in DC and the Biden-Harris administration. Think about this for a second. This president has made the largest investment probably any leader has ever made in history to address climate change and advance environmental justice. And if President Biden does not win re-election, who knows what Trump is going to do to gut all the gains we've made to protect our Earth, especially today as we celebrate Earth Day. And so we need to work our butts off this upcoming election and tell the voters about the receipts that Biden has delivered on to deliver for Clevelanders and deliver for the American people.
That is a fantastic note to end on. Mayor Bibb, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Ken, for having me. We'll see you soon, brother.
Enough! Send him to the big house, not the White House. Get the new exclusive tees, mugs, and stickers right now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.